Hi, I'm Patrice Lockhart, and I'm a menopause health practitioner, and I work with menopausal women.
Hi, I'm Simone L. Bowe. I'm a leadership and HR strategist.
And today, we are here to marry what we do today. We are talking about menopausal women and women in leadership and women in the corporate world. I was waiting for this, Simone. What do you think? This is the first question that comes to mind. As far as the workplace, the corporate place here in the Bahamas is concerned, how do you see the corporate world viewing menopause and the women in the workplace?
Well, to be honest with you, Patrice, I'm not sure if Corporate Bahamas has given this thought because I think the prevailing thought is it's your personal thing and you deal with it.
Yes.
The best way you know how. So when we talk about introducing, for instance, a menopause policy to an organization, I think that may sound very progressive.
Foreign.
Very foreign, yes.
As a HR professional, how has that impacted you, hearing about menopause, you being a female, yet understanding it's not been in the workplace? What has been, as a professional and as a woman, what has been your thoughts about it?
Well, to be honest, along with other issues that affect women at work, there is menopause, there is breastfeeding, there's even the menstrual cycle, right? So we have other countries in the world who are also introducing policies around that and creating, I don't know if I want to say concessions, but at least accommodations, right, for women who are dealing in any of those spheres. So it really behooves, I think, the HR professionals particularly to get caught up on what is menopause and how we can introduce even educational programs within our organization so we're more aware. I think awareness is key.
As a menopause professional in the country, that has been one of my issues, reaching out to the human resources professionals in this country. And I'm going to be honest, it's been a difficult time. And meanwhile, governments across the world are instituting laws literally all over the UK. America is recognizing, they're talking about some things, and I got a list of countries that are doing it right now. There are organizations throughout the UK, they're the most progressive. Throughout the USA, including Microsoft, throughout Canada, where menopause policies are now a part of the workspace thinking. And do you think our professionals in our country are going to wait until it becomes a you have to, or they're going to be progressive? What are your thoughts?
I think the more people are aware, and I think aware of how menopause impacts women and their work, I think that is what the key is. A lot of times people aren't aware of all the symptoms and how this can affect a woman mentally, particularly physically, and then maybe the physical affecting the mental,
and the emotional,
right, and the emotional as well. And so when we understand fully what it is and the impacts that it has, and impacts on attendance, impacts on productivity, impacts on decision making, particularly as we talk about women in leadership, etc., then I believe persons are becoming more progressive in the HR space, and we're able to drive things in our organization.
That is the conversation I've been reaching out to the human resources professionals in the country, saying, I want to have a conversation with you. I want you to understand that I talk to these women. I even did one of my sessions during the first years. I have a stack of surveys. And this was when I did what every woman should know about menopause. And I reached out to a number of organizations who at the time paid for their staff to come in. So I had a cross section of women, and it was interesting looking at the surveys. And one of the things why I'm so passionate about reaching the professionals in our country is that women deal with brain fog. They deal with the issue of lack of concentration. It causes women to not be as confident. I have, and I won't even, CPA. She's an account, CFO. And she was saying to me, Patrice, I have these memory fogs, and she says sometimes she gets afraid because so much is dependent on her and what's going on with her, but she can't talk about it in her workplace. And I get women tell me so many different stories. And one of my biggest things is I would love to speak to the Human Resources Association to really outline to them what is it what women are saying. Women are even leaving their jobs. When I studied menopause in the UK, that was a big thing. But it was shocking to me as women start telling me their stories. Women who have left. The last lady told me she just walked off.
Wow.
She went up to lunch. She said she had a couple of jobs. She just left on the lunch hour and never came back. Women have told me, I left because I couldn't take it anymore.
And this is why the education is so important, because even when we're at work and we have, persons experiencing this on the job, you need to understand, to help them understand what they're dealing with. On the surface, this could look like, okay, this person's performance is diminishing,
or they're just being difficult,
bad mood, and this or that. I'm burnt out. I need to leave the job, but maybe you didn't need to leave. Yeah. Maybe you just needed to
some time,
and
then treatment. We have women who, let me tell you, one of my clients had to get a doctor's certificate to work from home. Because she was going to the bathroom, she was having those issues. Then there are women who will have to call and say it's because they're tired, they're sleepy. I haven't slept for days, for nights, but I have to still go on that job and perform. I can't, my boss won't listen to me.
Sleep deprivation will take it out of you.
Listen,
you cannot think, you cannot function
focus,
properly.
and your internal customers are affected, your external customers are affected. And these women, they open up and they tell me their stories, but they don't have an outlet in the workplace. And I'm reaching out to even you as a human resources professional. One of my biggest visions is to speak to your organization to help them to understand exactly what women are saying, what the data is saying. And there again, I often say that menopause is flying under the radar.
It really is.
In the workplace. And there's so much that can be done. Even as simple as women who have to go on the job and they're tired, haven't slept all night. Instead of coming in 9 o'clock, if you allow that woman to come in 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and maybe work through her lunch hour and 1 hour afterwards. There's so many simple things.
And I can tell you, it's very encouraging that our government right now is looking at amending the current Employment Act. Now, it doesn't speak specifically to menopause, but those things that you just mentioned in terms of flexi time, right? Not working on these straight shifts and things that we're accustomed to. So what you just said would be considered flexi time. I could come in a little later, work a little later, right? You have things like remote work. Policies.
COVID has taught us that this is possible.
Exactly. We also are looking at implementing mental health leave as a part of the law, right? Because you're not necessarily sick in the traditional sense of the word. I may just have, as you say, the brain fog or sleep deprivation. I need to just kind of collect myself. I can't function at my optimum,
right?
And I need a bit of time, but I'm not sick. Right?
You know what? Psychologically or mentally and emotionally, that's a level of sickness. Maybe not physically.
Right.
I had a client. She had a breakdown at work. She had told her bosses that she was dealing with hormonal issues, and her boss, a female, couldn't understand it and had an issue with her. So she said to her, I don't care what your issue is, you come here to work. And she was saying to me one day this day, Patrice, it was hard. So much was going on. She said her boss was standing over her and started telling her, was yelling at her and speaking to her in a way she shouldn't have. She said, Patrice, I grabbed the chair and I started rocking back and forth. And she said how she started trembling. She had a breakdown on the job right here in the Bahamas.
Absolutely. It happens every day.
Listen here.
There's so much we could talk about in that regard.
Yes, and the goal is to make the workplace menopause friendly, where we understand that a part of a woman's health care is menopause. I know we're not there yet, but even having it on the books where women with it's just like how we can go to NHI and there are a lot of things that are dealt with. A woman's health issue is also menopause.
Yeah, some of the reading I was doing in preparation for this, I was seeing where they say you have to be careful because this can now encroach on some of those protected characteristics that we have in the law as it relates to age, as it relates to gender and discrimination.
Yes, because I'm going to tell you one thing. We may wait until later, as a society, unfortunately. But I see later on in labor laws where women are going to say, you know what, this happened to me because they tell me these stories. They sit and they cry. They weep with me and tell me their stories. There's going to be a time where the women are not going to just sit down and weep anymore. They're going to take it to the tribunal.
Absolutely.
They're going to fight for it.
We are seeing more and more of that. Before we would say in the Bahamas that people are not litigious, but we're seeing that more and more people
fighting for their rights.
They're more aware, they're educated, and they are going for what they feel they deserve. And so I agree with you. We can't be reactive about it. I think we need to do our research. We need to do our homework. And unfortunately, a lot of it begins with women in leadership and their understanding and their levels of empathy and not leading from an old, archaic mindset of, hey, I had to deal with it. I didn't have any concessions. I had to push my way through. So what happened to you? Then making it seem as if now that today's woman is weak. No, today's woman is acknowledging
what's
my capacity.
On. That's it. Yes.
I cannot go beyond this, and I'm not going to force myself to go beyond this point.
Right. Because
where others have done that in the past.
Right. And because today's woman also has so much more. Yesterday's woman, a lot of times she had to stay home with the kids, and she didn't have the pressure and the stress many times of the man is gone and not helping, so she has to make sure the kids are okay. She has to take those kids to piano lessons. She's got to take this one to softball practice. She's got church choir practice. She's working. She's on the job, a professional woman.
Keeping the house, doing all of these things. Perhaps continuing her education. Like there's
many
so
of us are doing
much things.
Yes, and so at some point, women are saying, okay, I got to take off my superwoman cape at some point.
Yes.
Yeah, because what's happening now is women are dealing with the consequences of pushing themselves beyond the limit. That's why so many of us need to deal with mental health issues. That's why we have Coach Doretha working with the women. A lot of women have trauma in their life. I deal with so many menopausal women, and as they go into menopause, a lot of them that have the psychological issues is because they haven't dealt with a lot of trauma. I've had a client, she's had 5 years of pure trauma back to back, and the only thing that she could do was I gotta get up and move on. I can't stay here. And so I find these women, they keep just stuffing their stuff away, but when they get into menopause and their brain is being affected, there's a part of the brain that deals with that area, and it's being affected by the hormonal change, and then she gets to a point where she's not able to handle it because that part of her brain, the amygdala, that's not getting the support that has been getting all her life with that hormone, her tank is low or empty. Then when we see her acting out when we see her becoming aggressive, when we see her becoming irritable, when we see her, acting out, and we're wondering, why is she like that? There's a whole story behind that
That's
woman
right. That's
as to
right.
what's going on.
And we'll just diminish it at work. You hear it all the time, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're single. Oh, she just needs a man.
Yes.
Right? I mean, and all of those things come with education, right?
Yes.
Diversity, inclusion, belonging,
Yes.
all of those things that we talk about in human resources. This is a part of it.
This
Diversity isn't just about race and ethnicity and gender and all of that. It's about these things that make us human beings.
Yes.
Right?
All of the things that make us human. At one point when I was in the corporate world, it was all about you show up on the job, you leave your problems at the door.
Who can do that? Who can do that?
Listen here, whether you have little kids or not, and I know about having little kids and having to show up in the corporate world, you gotta leave your problems behind. They don't care about that. Your kid's in the hospital or you have to go to a thing, they're upset at you that you have to go and leave. And I know about this. I've had to live that story.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I know people who are coming to work and they're homeless. You know what I'm saying?
Jesus.
So much has happened the night before. They're struggling. They're, paycheck to paycheck. And we have to get off this judgment seat and say, well, they should have. They should have this. They should have that. Listen, you pass
Life
nothing
happens to all of us.
until you are dead.
Yeah. Isn't that something?
I am telling you.
You learn that after a while.
You're going to live this life.
Yeah.
And things happen that you don't expect.
That you didn't plan for. But it does.
It does.
Simone, I am so grateful for this conversation. And I hope that as the persons out there listening on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on maybe YouTube, here in the Bahamas, recognize that we need to address the situation. I've been reaching out to organizations. I want to come in and I want to have this conversation about menopause. Training. One of the things I offer is training for the leadership, because we need to understand how to identify when it's happening. We need to identify, leadership also needs to know how to have the conversation. Right. They notice something happening. How do you open up a conversation with a menopausal woman? Because there's a lot of prejudice. There's a lot of, and I'm guilty too back then. You in your hot flashes, you're having a personal summer, So what people don't understand is a lot of times that drive women into themselves. And they don't want to talk about it. This conversation could go on, and I'm looking forward to another one of these.
Absolutely, my mind's already going. So. Ways that we can create more awareness.
Yes, I've started, and I've been doing some articles, and I decided this year I'm going to focus on menopause in the workplace in my country, because there was a research I saw that made me feel really awful about what they said about the English-speaking Caribbean women. And so we have to become educated. We have to. I thank you all for being a part of this session, watching in with us as we talk about menopause in the workplace. And I want to thank Simone, our limitless life coach. If there's one bit of advice you'd like to leave, what would that be?
I would like to encourage my fellow human resource leaders and leaders of our organizations, executives and C-suite members and business owners. Take a moment to just do some research, reach out to Patrice, have an information session, really see how this is impacting our workplace so that we can be a support. A lot of people feel like, well, that's not the workplace's responsibility, but I believe it's our responsibility to at least present information to people. We can't live their lives for them, but we can present information that helps them to make great choices for themselves and for us to be great employers. And so with that, I hope that you would reach out to Patrice, our local subject matter expert in this area, and really get the information that you need to equip your organizations, whether that's in policy, whether that's in educational seminars and practice in the organization, and making reasonable accommodation for women who are going through this stage in their lives.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to having you again.
Awesome. So am I.